Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. The winners and losers. And now what I want to do is give you my updated top 25 when it comes to college hoops. And I'm going to try to be quick. We hit on a lot of these teams, but I think if I can give you one bullet point on this exact situation, it is as follows. It is that this is basically the last top 25 I'm going to do till the start of next season. Because as crazy as it sounds, with the transfer portal basically done, we still have, again, as I just said a few minutes ago, 2, 3, 4 guys that are still kind of difference makers. But with the transfer portal done, with the NBA draft deadline passed, we kind of know what everybody's roster looks like for next year. Now, could we have a scenario where there's some crazy reclassification like Jalen Duren and Amani Bates at this time last summer? I guess it could happen. Could we have some crazy transfer story or a coach gets... I mean, stuff could happen. But for the most part, the rosters are set and college basketball is ready to go for the 2022-2023 season. So this is my updated way too early top 25, but it's really not way too early anymore. We kind of know what rosters look like. We kind of know where teams are. And so let's get into it. Let's give you my updated top 25. Let's get to it. Let's start. I will go through the top 10 in detail, then kind of rip through everybody else as time goes on. First of all, number one team in the country. I officially switched it at the deadline to enter the NBA draft. It has not changed since then. It is, drumroll please, and I promise I won't do drum rolls for every team. It's the North Carolina Tar Heels. And I know what the argument against North Carolina is. Oh, they just got hot late in the year. Oh, they got lucky. Oh, they got this. Oh, they got that. First of all, they didn't get hot at the end of the year. They were 13-3 over the final 2 months of the regular season. They beat Duke at Cameron on Coach K's final game. They go to the Final Four. They beat Duke in New Orleans. And then they, of course, almost win a national championship. After losing that title game, though, they bring back four starters from last year's team. And again, I know I've talked about it a lot, but credit NIL. Caleb Love is back. Armando Bacot is back. When I did my too early top 25 after the season, I did not think either of those guys was going to be back. That's on top of RJ Davis. That's on top of Leaky Black. So 4 starters from last year's team. The one piece that they are missing, of course, is Brady Manick, the really impactful transfer from Oklahoma. They have not replaced him. They still technically have a scholarship available for this summer. There is no super obvious name to replace him left in the portal, so there's a chance that they could just rock as is. Now, I don't think they are the clear, definitive, unquestioned number one going into next year, but in my opinion, they are, in fact, number one. I understand the argument that they didn't play well early. I understand they didn't play well in the middle of the year. But over the final 2 months of the season, they were one of the handful of best teams in the country. They bring back 4 starters. And remember, this is a team. It's not as though this is, Iowa that recruits 2 stars and develops them into 4 or 5 stars. This is North Carolina. Armando Bacot, RJ Davis, Caleb Love were all McDonald's All-Americans coming in. It took them a little bit longer, but they're all starting to reach their potential. I think Caleb Love is a potential national player of the year. So is Armando Bacot. RJ Davis is going to be awesome. And yes, they would obviously like to address the one spot that they're missing, but North Carolina is my preseason number 1 team. Number 2, this is a new move since my most updated top 25, and that is a team that I just talked about in the winners or losers. It's the Houston Cougars. Love me some Cougars, baby. Love me some Cougars. So what I would say really quickly about Houston is, the more that I looked at this team, the more that it was hard for me to justify keeping them out of this position, okay? So as I said, they made an Elite 8, and they did lose some important players off that Elite 8 team. Kyler Edwards is not going to be back. Tajay Moore, who was awesome during their NCAA tournament run, is not going to be back. But they still return a bunch of key players from that Elite 8 run, and they return, as I said, the 2 players that were their 2 leading scorers that both got hurt in the middle of the year, Tremont Mark and then Marcus Sasser, who, as I said, averaged 18 points per game prior to his injury. This is a potential first-team All-American. This is a kid kind of like in an Ochai Agbaji mode where I think he can play himself into the top 10, top 15 next year. He's a little bit of an undersized guy, more of a combo guard than a true point. He's only about 6'2", 6'3", but you talk about a guy that can put the ball in the basket. He was great during Houston's Final Four run 2 years ago. I think he is a potential first-team All-American. Marcus Sasser is back. I just talked about Houston. I have them at number 2. Number 3, it is actually the team that I had number 1 coming out of the season. It is the Arkansas Razorbacks. And I think, Arkansas fans, some of them will be thrilled to have them at number 3. Some of them feel like they should be number 1. But all I can really say about Arkansas is this. I know that they lost basically everybody off of that Elite 8 team from this past season. But guess what? They lost most everybody off of last year's Elite 8 team as well and made the Elite 8 this year. So when I look at this Arkansas team, this is what I can tell you. There's only 2 players back from last year. But, as I've said a million times, number 2 ranked recruiting class in the country, 6 top 100 recruits. Everybody says that I only talk about Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, and Nick Smith, the McDonald's All-Americans. Darian Ford could be a difference maker. Joseph Pinion could be a difference maker. Barry Dunning is going to be good. But then on top of that, the players they added in the portal, Ricky Council, I'm telling you, is a player that can play in the NBA one day. Trevon Brazile, very much the same. And so when I look at this team, what I see, yes, it's a lot of new pieces. Yes, it may take some time to put it all together. They have a very tough out-of-conference schedule to start, including a trip to a loaded Maui Invitational field with a bunch of teams that I'm going to talk about here. But at the same time, look at this Arkansas squad. We're talking about 5, 6 guys that could potentially play in the NBA. We're talking about maybe 3 top 20 picks next year in Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr., and Jordan Walsh. So I could go on and on. I've talked about Arkansas enough during this offseason. I think it may take them a minute to figure everything out, but there is so much talent. Musselman always finds his roster and his fit in the guys that work for him. I have Arkansas at number 3. And by the way, if you want to hear any more Arkansas talk, I've literally talked about them seemingly on every episode this offseason. Number 4, another big riser, another team that I talked about, another team that's kind of weird and new to the rankings. Creighton is at number 4. This was a team that, as I told you, remember, 2 years ago in that NCAA tournament bubble, make a Sweet 16. How about this? They lose all 5 starters off of that team. This year struggle early. The whole team is freshmen. They're one of the few teams that really didn't hit the portal last offseason, but brought in freshmen. And then all of a sudden they suffer all these injuries, and they get better with every injury. Starting point guard Sharif Mitchell goes down early. Ryan Nembhard steps up, plays really well. Ryan Nembhard goes down with 3-4 games left in the season. Trey Alexander steps in his place. They take off, destroy Providence in the Big East tournament, nearly upset Villanova, get to the NCAA tournament where they beat San Diego State, and they give Kansas a run for their money after losing another starter in the opening round of the tournament, Ryan Kalkbrenner, to injury. Well, first of all, a little bit of good news. I'm told Ryan Kalkbrenner is back working out, doing all that stuff. I don't know if he's at 100% yet, but Ryan Kalkbrenner, they're going to be healthy. And that team that was just a terror to face is basically back intact. Couple things. One, they got a kid, Arthur Kaluma, I think could be a breakout National Player of the Year. Couple 20-point games late in the season. When I say National Player of the Year, I don't mean like National Player of the Year. I mean he's going to be a breakout player nationally. And then 2, and he's another kid that could be a first-round pick next year. And then, of course, Baylor Shireman, the transfer from South Dakota State. Everybody recruited him. I know you heard from Gonzaga and Kansas and Arizona, and there was the big thing with Kentucky that sort of led John Calipari to say we don't pay an NIL guarantees. Don't get me started on that. He fills in the one spot that they're missing. 4 starters back. They add a marquee transfer. This is the best Creighton roster of the Greg McDermott era. You could argue maybe the best Creighton roster of all time. I have Creighton in at number 4. Number 5, another team we just talked about, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Love them. I mean, I just love them. And I know every time you say anything nice about Gonzaga, they're overrated. They stink. They suck. Well, here's the deal. 2015, Sweet 16. 2016, what did they do in 2016? I can't totally remember off the top of my head. 2017, Final Four. 2018, Sweet 16. 2019, Elite 8. 2020, they were going to be a number 1 seed, tournament gets canceled. 2021, they play for a national championship. I bring it all up to say that since 2015, they've made the Elite 8 they've made the Sweet 16 every single year. They've made 4 Elite Eights, 2 Final Fours. 2020, the season the tournament was canceled, they had a team good enough to win it. They're going to break through and win it one of these years. I don't know if it's going to be next year. I just talked about it. They need to have one of those guards step up, but I think Julian Strother could be a breakout player. I really like his talent. Drew Timme, you know what you're going to get. And then just the question becomes, who else steps up, who kind of evolves and grows in that program? Another name to know, Efton Reed, transfer from LSU. I think he'll be really good. I feel like I'm talking fast, but I'm trying to get in a lot of information in a short amount of time. But I do have Gonzaga at number 5. If you missed last segment on the biggest winners and losers from the NBA draft deadline, I talk more Gonzaga there. Number 6, a team that I think I'm a little higher on than most. That's old Mick Cronin, Big Mick Energy, and the UCLA Bruins. And so UCLA, obviously the big news, they did lose Johnny Juzang to the NBA draft deadline. And also, Cody Riley kind of decided not to use an extra year of eligibility. Miles Johnson decided not to use an extra year of eligibility. That kid is literally like a genius. I'm told he basically got an engineering job where he's making he's just a genius. And so he's going off to a professional sector. And then Peyton Watson, one-and-done kid, didn't really develop, whatever. But here's why I like him. 1, one of the best forwards in college basketball coming back, Jaime Jaquez. 2, I really like the freshman class led by Amari Bailey. Now, Amari Bailey, you know the deal. You know his mom. If you don't, you can Google her. But Amari Bailey's a really good player, a real difference maker, and he is going to be in the backcourt with a 4th-year starter at point guard in Tiger Campbell. How often can you say that a player is a 4th-year starter at point guard at a school like UCLA? That is what UCLA has. This kid's been around for so long. He was recruited by Steve Alford, coached by Steve Alford his freshman year before suffering an ACL tear. Comes back year 4 under Mick Cronin, Jaime Jaquez. They also have another kid that I think is going to be a big difference maker for them, Jalen Clark, who is a really good defensive player. He actually played well in a game against Villanova that I was at early in the season. But you add Amari Bailey to the mix. You add a Dem Bona to the mix. This is a team that I like. I'm really high. I am really high on the UCLA Bruins. Number 7, a team that I think I'm a little higher on than most, and I've talked about them a lot this offseason, Kentucky Wildcats. And I talked about it on Wednesday's show. I get the frustration of Kentucky fans. You have the situation with the St. Peter's loss. Then you have Shaedon Sharpe on your roster. He never plays. He goes pro. And I get where the frustration comes in. What I would also say to that, though, and this is important in my opinion, is that they still got a really good roster coming back. I think I told this story, but I was talking to Sam, who runs the Torres on UK account, and he's like, man, worst offseason ever. I'm like, dude, you got back the National Player of the Year. And here's the bottom line. If you have Oscar Tshiebwe, you have a chance, and that is exactly what Kentucky has because of the fact that Oscar Tshiebwe is back. National Player of the Year. They also have Severe Wheeler back. I talked a lot about Kentucky on Wednesday's show, and I think they're going to be uniquely interesting next season. Remember, Jacob Toppin is a player that will return next season. Jacob Toppin is a player that we talked about on Wednesday's show. He decides to test the NBA draft waters, does not stay in the draft. I think he has a chance to be better than the guy that he's replacing, Keon Brooks. Antonio Reeves is a difference maker at transfer. It appears as though C.J. Frederick is healthy. If he's healthy, that is a real big thing for Kentucky, because he is a guy that is a 46% career three-point shooter, dating back to his days at Iowa, was out all last season with injury. I bring it up to say, when you look at Oscar Tshiebwe, when you look at the fact that Severe Wheeler is back, multiple McDonald's All-Americans, this is a team. I am telling you, on paper, there really isn't that much difference between this year's team and last year's team. And remember, last year's team was good enough to compete for a national championship. There was a time in the year where we thought they were good enough to win it all. It's on John Calipari. Listen, he's running out of bullets. He's running out of excuses. He has got to get this team deep into a tournament again. No real tournament, real success. 2015 was the last Final Four. But this is a team that's good enough to do it, and we will see if they do. Number 8, another one that I've talked about a lot. It is the Duke Blue Devils, and there's not really much to say, right? with Trevor Keels deciding to go pro, they only have one guy back. That's Jeremy Roach. But they also bring in the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country. 4 top 12 players. Derek Lively, a center. Kyle Filipowski, a power forward. Derek Whitehead, a guard. Mark Mitchell, a small forward. They've also added a few guys in the portal, and as I said a minute ago, it appears as though John Shire is still aggressive in the portal, looking to upgrade that 2-guard spot. And so you look at this Duke team, they're fascinating. One, if John Shire completes this portal thing, I think I'm going to have to give him a little bit of credit because it's clear that he is not just doing what Coach K did. He is putting his own stamp on this program. But then 2, the recruiting hasn't taken a dip, and they are again going to have players that are good enough to lead them to a national championship. Now, I don't know that there's a Paolo Banchero on this roster. Derek Lively, probably their best player, is more of a defensive energy guy than he is a take-over-the-game guy. Derek Whitehead is really good, but we'll see if he can evolve. But with Duke, it's going to be fascinating, right? Probably the most talented roster in college basketball. I would say maybe outside of Arkansas, maybe on top of Arkansas. I mean, they might be number 1. But you also have a first-year, 34-year-old head coach who has never done it before. They are going to be a fascinating watch. I have Duke at number 8. New team in the top 10, Baylor. Kind of like what Baylor did quietly. Returned back a bunch of key players from last year's team. You look at that Baylor team last year, that's a team that dealt with so many injuries, and they still ended up with a number 1 seed, and they were still one of the favorites to win the national championship. Well, now they bring back 2 of their 3 leading scorers, Adam Flagler and L.J. Cryer. Now, L.J. Cryer was very limited by injuries. He only played 19 games. But you bring back 2 of your 3 leading scorers. You bring back 2 defensive big guys that were part of the national championship team 2 years ago, Jonathan Chama-Chachua, Flo Thamba. And then also a couple really interesting pieces that are being brought in as well. Keontae George, McDonald's All-American lead guard, really could be a difference maker in that point guard spot. Jalen Bridges, a transfer from West Virginia, who I really like a lot, and I think fits perfectly. He went to West Virginia. Doesn't really make sense. I think he's going to be a perfect fit at Baylor. I have Baylor at number 9. Really like them. Number 10, and then after we get to 10, we'll start to rip through these teams. Number 10 is the Kansas Jayhawks, okay? And Kansas, it's what I said a minute ago. It's dollar Bill Self, baby. You can dislike Bill Self, but this guy gets results. He's like Tom Amansky, defensive drills video. This man gets results, okay? 2 starters back, DeJuan Harris, Jalen Wilson. Also, the Kevin McCullough kid who's a transfer is really has a chance to be a really talented player for them. I think if he can stay healthy, he could be like a Big 12 Player of the Year type candidate. Also, 3 McDonald's All-Americans, MJ Rice, Grady Dick, and Ernest Udo as well. Really like Kansas there. Let's quickly go through some of them. I'll hit on some of the marquee ones. Number 11, Tennessee. Not much to share there. They got like 4 of their top 6 guys back from a team that won the SEC title and postseason title, excuse me. They got like 4 of their top 6 guys back. One of the hottest teams going into the NCAA tournament. They're going to be in the mix again. You can argue about Rick Barnes. You can tell me he doesn't get it done in the postseason. I get it. I get your frustration. I'm just telling you point blank, this is a really talented team that is, again, really good on paper. Number 12, one of the big jumpers since the season ended. How about my boy Mike Woodson? How about those Indiana Hoosiers? Talked about it a few weeks ago. Trace Jackson Davis is back. That on top of Xavier Johnson. They bring in some really nice freshmen. Jalen Hood-Schifino, Malik Renault, 2 guys that are basically top 30-ish type recruits. Tamar Bates could be a breakout player. Listen, you look at the Big Ten right now. Michigan, as we said, lost a ton. Michigan State lost a ton. Purdue lost a ton. Ohio State lost a ton. Indiana's the Big Ten favorite. You can like it. You can hate it. You can say it'll never happen. They are the Big Ten favorite. Trace Jackson Davis is awesome. Indiana at number 12. By the way, extensive recap on YouTube of Indiana and what they look like now with Trace Jackson Davis back. Number 13, by the way, really interesting team. TCU, remember, pushed Arizona to the brink. Their star player, Mike Miles, who was the best player on the floor that night, declares for the draft, says he's leaving, then decides to not even go through the process and comes back. Eddie Lampkin, who dominated Arizona in that game, is also back. TCU at number 13. Number 14, Auburn. Listen, I like Auburn. You know, the guards got a lot of flack. was like a top 10 team all year. I mean, what do you want? I mean, blame the guards, whatever. And then in the offseason, they went ahead and addressed the front court, losing Jabari Smith, losing Walker Kessler. I believe both will be first-round picks. Replace him with Janae Broom, who was awesome at Morehead State, one of the best transfers in the portal. And then also on top of that, Johan Traore, a McDonald's All-American. I really like this team. Bruce Pearl, he's coming on the podcast. We'll ask him ourselves later this spring. But I really like this Auburn team. Number 15, maybe a little biased, don't care, Uconn Huskies. I actually really like Uconn. Talked about them a ton last week in the transfer portal winners and losers. But you look at Uconn, and I've said it. 3 key guys back. Andre Jackson, Adama Sanogo, Jordan Hawkins. Again, you lose most of your starting backcourt. You had a bunch of guys that have never played. They all hit the portal. You replace them with good players. Tristan Newton, 18-5-5 at East Carolina. Naheem Aline from Virginia Tech, 40% three-point shooter. Hassan Diarra. 3 really good guards come in. I think this UConn team has a chance to be sneaky good. I've seen them as fringe top 25. I have them at number 15. Number 16, Alabama. I'll say this. I actually, it was a bad year at Alabama. I really like what they did this offseason. They added 2 guards on, by the way, number 3 ranked recruiting class behind only Arkansas and Duke. But they added 2 veteran guards via the portal, Mark Sears from Ohio, Dominic Welch from St. Bonaventure. To me, that's important because last year they really were a guard short when Amari Burnett got hurt. Well, guess what? Amari Burnett's healthy, and Nate Oates is basically saying, look, I ain't going into another year where I'm a guard short. I'd rather have 1 guard too many and let them all figure out who's going to play and what the roles are going to be than be a guard too short. So 2 transfers, also the number 3 ranked recruiting class, small forward Brandon Miller, shooting guard Jaden Bradley, on top of a couple key returners, most notably, as I said, Namari Burnett and Javon Quinterly got hurt in the NCAA tournament, will be back midseason. 17, Villanova. Don't need me to tell you. 3 starters back from a Final Four team, but no Jay Wright. Don't know what to make of them. Intrigued by Villanova. Number 18, Arizona. Lose Dalen Terry. I keep them in the top 25. I probably could have put them a few slots lower. They do have a nice core coming back, though. 4 of the top 7 are still back from a number 1 seed. They're going to be different. They're going to be athletic. By the way, every time I praise Sean Miller for last season, I get crushed by Arizona fans. But how about Sean Miller in the middle of NCAA sanctions, leaving 3 first-round picks potentially for Tommy Lloyd and Dalen Terry, Benedict Mathurin, and Christian Coloco. Tommy Lloyd, we're going to learn a lot about him next year because it's going to be a different roster, but 4 of the top 7 are back next year. I still think they may have a move to make in the portal. Stay tuned there. Number 19, big jumper. Big jumper on number 19. The San Diego State Aztecs. They're one that really took advantage of the extra year of eligibility. 3 guys that were technically seniors decided to use that extra year. Nathan Mensah, a center. Matt Bradley, their leading scorer. Adam Seiko, a shooter. Chad Baker-Mazara played well late. I really like this team. They were one of the best defensive teams in the country last year. I think they're going to be significantly improved offensively. What do they get from their starting point guard? Lamont Butler was really good last year. Think he needs to make an even bigger leap for this team to reach their potential. Have San Diego State at number 19. Number 20, just mentioned Sean Miller. He inherits a loaded Xavier team, returns most everybody off of a team that was in the top 15 for most of last year before they fell apart. They win the NIT. Sean Miller, another guy who will be on this show in the coming weeks. We can ask him about his team. Really excited to see Sean Miller and Xavier next year. 21, Texas A&M. I'll be quick here. Listen, basically every key piece except for one is back from the team that went to the SEC championship game, should have been in the NCAA tournament. Love Texas A&M. 22, Florida State, another one. Really like their young core. They were a team that played well at times. Remember, they beat Duke during the season. They finished 10-10 in the ACC, 17 wins overall. Kind of fell apart in the middle of the season. They were all freshmen and sophomores. They return everybody. Leonard Hamilton ain't having 2 bad years in a row. The other thing to remember, too, they've had 1 million kids drafted over the last couple years, and I think that's part of it. 23, Michigan. Talked about Michigan a minute ago. Hunter Dickinson, not much else. 24, Texas. We talked about them last week. Return a lot, but they also bring in the star transfer Tyrese Hunter. Can you get guys to play together? The talent is there. They're a top 10 team talent-wise, but they were a top 10 team talent-wise last year and fell on their face. I ain't making that mistake again. Number 25, Virginia. 26, Wyoming. 27, Texas Tech. 28, Illinois. 29, Michigan State. 30, Oklahoma.